Okay, good morning. So I've had some interesting interactions the past couple of days. Guess this is in the general theme of experimenting with expression, self expression. And let's see, I had one interaction with a supervisor where I work. And no, see, what do I want to say about it that would be useful? I was a bit upset about something. This guy is an interesting guy. He's a nice guy. He's an interesting guy. He's funny, and I've enjoyed being around him for the most part. And yet, there were some things I wanted to talk about. Um, Trying to think how to express all this right now. Most people aren't good at talking in a sincere way. A lot of the pain that we have is manifested you could say, verbal level, discursive level. We tend to live in our thoughts, tend to live in our minds, and there's so much more. It's like we've got this kind of crust, this matrix of thought-based reality, and thought, one of the primary constituents is words, sentences, that verbal capacity that we have. Even if it's not being audibly expressed, there's kind of that inner reflection at the mental level of thoughts, words. And so much, especially as you start to engage with healing, and you recognize that relationship between thought and pain, and thought, getting lost in thought, getting lost in words, getting lost in rumination is one of the strategies. You could say the ego, that's sort of a low, in my opinion, not the best, low resolution, I guess, not the best word or metaphor, but it's like we have this psychological architecture, this psychological superstructure, or just structure, that has as its primary goal avoidance of pain, avoidance of truth, avoidance of pain, I guess. And we're all carrying a lot of that stuff in our life. And most of us, the remedy that the culture provides us, even though often not explicit, often not explicitly, although not far from it either, but at a minimum, implicitly, the culture tells us just endless distraction, endless entertainment, endless gratification of physical or hedonic desires is the remedy. You never have to deal with it. Just there's always another dopamine hit. There's always another cigarette hit. There's always another drink. There's always another relationship. That you can stay on that treadmill infinitely, and And that's not true, but that's what we're sold. And again, maybe not so explicitly, though in this era sometimes it is kind of explicit marketing, but um, and so one of the things that happens is in order to avoid that pain, we kind of bounce up into our mind or just stay there. It's in the body is one way to say it. It's actually deeper than just that, but a good access point is anchoring in the body and feeling all the discomfort. That stuff starts to open up, and you'll notice how quickly you just shoot back up into the mind because of the discomfort there and because of uh, habit, the force of habit. In one sense, there's a momentum there. Um, it's frightening in a sense to start to contend with what we have inside of us, what we're carrying. Anyways, I don't really want to get into all of that right now, but um, and that translates in waking reality, in interactions with people, into patterns of speech, ways of interacting. Um, Again, it's not this superficial, but kind of the surface most level is the words we use, how we speak to each other. And we tend to want to think that to be literalists about what's being said. What's really happening often is there's an energetic transmission that's hidden in what's being said, passed between people. In other words, often what's being said is not congruent with the emotion, the deeper emotion there. And we have a momentum behind social appropriateness in conversation as well. So sometimes it's hard to confront or interrupt some of these patterns that are just bouncing around between people because it means breaking the script, right? Breaking the trance is another way to say it, but breaking the verbal script and the social script and addressing the reality of the emotions there. And you become more and more aware of that the more work you do and the more you're committed to being congruent, that you can't really just play along with gossip and passive aggressiveness and indirectness, because you're residing more and more at a deeper level, at an energetic level. But most people don't do that, you know. And they will greatly resent you for pointing it out or for interrupting or for not going along with the script. There can be blowback there. So being congruent can be a challenge. But it's a simpler way of living because there's less hypocrisy, there's less division, inner division, there's less two-facedness or multi-facedness. Anyways, I'm trying to connect all the dots here. I'm trying to, because I've had this interaction with this supervisor who I sensed strongly just did not want to have a one-on-one. My strong sense is that's kind of a supervisor's role, as somebody that you can talk to and be direct with, and definitely not abuse that. In 6 months at the place I've been, I asked to talk to him once, you know, so it's not like a daily occurrence or something, but it took 4 days before he took 5 minutes to sit down. And it was only after, anyways, yeah, there was a little dust up there just even trying to get this. I think part of this, well, let me get to that in a moment. So yeah, we did sit down, and it's funny because this is a skilled person in many ways. You know, he's a manager of a produce section in a large, we'll just call it a grocery store. It's kind of a little bit more than that, but we'll say grocery store. And upscale isn't quite the right word, but it's not like, it's a nice place. It's a new place, so still has that new car smell to it. Um, and he does a pretty dang good job, you know, better than many. And he definitely knows the sort of details of the job really well. He's done it for a while. And I think, you know, he's like I say, he's a pleasant person. He's funny. He's fun to be around. But this is like kryptonite, it seems like, for him, just to have an honest conversation. And it's funny because there are other people there that are managers that I've talked to, and, you know, just trying to express something. Or somebody asked recently for feedback, and it's not like this huge thing for them, you know. We were able to just have an honest adult conversation. And anyways, but I mean, part of this is I have to show grace and be humble. I don't really know what's going on in this guy's life. To take 4 days to have 5 minutes for somebody who's been a hard worker for you, you know, looking at it that way, that was upsetting to me. So I did express that to him. But I've gotten better in these conversations at just staying in my own energy, staying in my own lane. And that's safer for everybody involved. It leads to less entanglements. It leads to a centeredness and a calmness. And I was very calm. I was also very tired. And sometimes that can be a useful thing because you're sort of energetically defeated, right? You're just kind of there, you know. It's not as much. I felt I was very direct and calm, and started out apologizing. Actually, I said, hey, any harm that I've done to you, I apologize. I guess as a way to kind of be humble, but also maybe to soften the interaction, to make it feel less confrontational. And but he just seemed on edge the whole time. Even me starting out that way, he found a way to seem upset about it. And what do you mean? What harm have you done to me? Or I don't know. I'm probably not being fair with that that impression, but that's how it came across. That's how I felt. And but yeah, I just stayed calm. I said, um, no, I'm just saying if there's anything that I've done, I don't know that I have. You know, and making direct eye contact. And see, he he's tried to. He tried to talk to me the previous day after 3 days of waiting. And the only time he made for me was at the end of the shift while he was busy doing something else. There was no like undivided attention. It wasn't like a sit down. He didn't even have to make eye contact. All those little cues that you pick up on, you know, where it's like, this is something that, there's something up here. I can't assume what's going on for this guy. I can assume a more graceful interpretation, which is he's under a lot of pressure, and he's having a hard time or something. I can go that route, and that's not out of the question. Part of me chooses not to exclusively go that route, or sometimes not even to go that route, because I'm not somebody's therapist. It's not up to me to be compassionate towards everybody, you know, and empathetically burn myself out, and that's a real possibility. It's also not up to me to be hostile and assume the worst. No, but I don't have to take on everybody else's pain. or even think about it. It's just too exhausting for me at this point, to be honest. Um, and at one point, I can also recognize like this is an adult that I'm interacting with, and I feel what I'm asking is not an inappropriate thing. Sometimes you have to evaluate and reflect. Is what I'm doing here out of the question? Is what I'm doing here out of pocket? Inappropriate, or what's my role in all this? But no, and I even sought advice from the store manager in this case, and he thought it wasn't an inappropriate thing at all to. So anyways, and you can, at that point, you can kind of feel like, you know what, no, this is appropriate. And this guy, on some level, I don't know why he's responding this way, but it's not really appropriate how he's responding. I don't have to be angry, I don't have to torch him, but I don't have to feel guilty, also about expressing myself. And so that's how I approach that. And it is tough sometimes when there's a hierarchical power imbalance and things like that. And I obviously don't want to get fired. I don't want to lose a good connection with this guy, just on a human level, but also professional level. So there's other things at stake. There's other sort of sub-narratives or other, forces, other dynamics here. The thing that protects you, though, is integrity. And not being perfectly integrous, not having perfect integrity. That's not a possibility. That's not the world we live in. But having good intentions, being less divided inwardly, doing your own work, and being honest and being sincere, being, I guess, in a sense, vulnerable, although there's an asterisk there. There's appropriate vulnerability and it's context specific. But anyway, so we, expressed, any harm I caused, I apologize. And I also expressed to him, I'm frustrated. It's hurtful when I feel like I'm getting the cold shoulder. I'm getting brushed off, or I don't know exactly how I phrased it. And that's a pretty intentional phrasing. I say when it feels like, because as much as I want to say when you are brushing me off, and that seems to be, at a certain point there's so much evidence, and you don't have to be blind to reality or lie to yourself, but it's more skillful to say it that way. And to be totally honest, there are times where I have made assumptions and I thought I had really good evidence, and this person is doing this to me, and I found out later, or in the process of expressing something, that there were things that I hadn't considered, and it did change the calculus of the whole thing. So it's just a safer, the more you can preserve, the more you can stay in your own truth, preserve the sort of free will of the situation. I can't say 100% what's going on for this guy. I just can't. It's too impossible. Life is too complicated. And again, it's not really my business to know any of that. What I know is that when it feels like I'm getting brushed off, when it seems like that, when it's coming across that way, that's hurtful. So that's how I phrase it. I say, when it feels like I'm getting brushed off day after day, or whatever I said, it's hurtful. And also, he had a pretty angry response the other day, and I expressed that. I said, that's hurtful. Now, what you'll notice most people do, and don't do this because it's just what often people will do is, I'm sorry if your feelings got hurt. I'm sorry if you felt that way. Don't bite on that one, because it's not a sincere apology. And so you don't tarnish your own sincerity with that. Don't accept it and don't reject it. Just don't engage with that. It's just one of those things you just have to ignore. It's stupid that people do it. It's hurtful. I can understand somebody being upset when people say that. It is hurtful. But it's just how people are. That's just how people are. They're going to say that. It's a defense mechanism. They're defending themselves. But it's insincere, and don't do that to other people. If you're not sorry, don't offer anything. I mean, you can say, I hear that that's upsetting to you, that it came across that way. See, a sincere apology. You also, on the other side, if somebody's expressing something, just because somebody's upset at you doesn't mean that you caused the harm or that you need to take that on. But if you feel they're being sincere, I mean, sometimes, yeah, you may have just fucked up and you can say, hey, I really messed that up. I apologize. I mean, that's a possibility, you know. But another way to do it that I think is authentic and true is you can say, I'm sorry that it came across that way. That wasn't my intention. And that's sincere, you know. I hear that. I'm sorry that it came across that way. That's certainly not my intention, you know. Just stay authentic, you know, find what's authentic for you to say. But anyways, so he said something like that. And that's just going to happen. It's annoying. And so I can't remember exactly. At one point he did express, you know, hey, I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I've got this, and, you know, kind of just laid out a lot of stuff that was going on. That's helpful sometimes, you know. You wish people would do that up front and just say, you know, the thing about this whole thing is with direct communication, you need to be willing to take a direct no. And I feel I am pretty much there most of the time. You know, when I asked this guy, could we talk? Had he just said, you know, I really don't want to do that. I'm not up for that, you know, in a respectful way, just an honest no. That would have been fine. I would have let it go at that point. You know, I've had other people, it's rare that people give an honest no. I'm trying to think of examples, but that would have been fine. And that's your responsibility in a conversation, is you're not trying to manipulate somebody. You present an honest request, and if it's turned down, okay, that's fine. You did your part. You can feel like, hey, I was willing to do this. I was willing to do something courageous to talk to somebody, and they're not there for whatever reason, or they said no. Now, if they're a dick, if they're unkind, if they're rude, disrespectful about saying no, you know, you can respond to that and say, hey, just be kind. You don't have to be rude to me. I can take a no, or whatever, you know. But that wasn't the case here. Everything energetically and sort of the circumstantial and evidence and the body language, and, you know, I sensed this, you know, he didn't want to engage. And I could have, that's sort of the next level step mastery. I could have said, okay, you're saying you're willing to do this, but it seems like you don't really want to talk. Is that right? Would you prefer not to? That's an even higher level of, I think, of energetic emotional intelligence. And that's a good area to develop into, because you wish people would just say no when they mean no, but they won't. And I'm sure I'm guilty of this, but you are running the race for you at this point, for your own integrity, for your own health. It's not really about beating other people or getting entangled with other people. That's a road to hell. It's not. It's about the truth. It's about you. In a sense, you could say it's about God, you know, doing it for God, doing it for the truth, doing it for peace. And so there is a possibility there of when if you're aware enough, present enough, you sense somebody saying yes, but everything about how they're saying it is a no. You can say, hey, if you prefer not to, that's okay. I'm not trying to pressure you. You know, that's a really mature thing to say. Anyways, but there was a rootedness. I stayed calm and present in the conversation, and you'll notice when you do that, the all the different ways that somebody tries to deflect, and when they're not willing to be present with what's going on for them, you can't force them, and you shouldn't try to force them, really, because even if you're right and they are acting from a very hurt, wounded, toxic, unhealthy place, they're not able to. It's hard because you don't want to take their accountability away from them, and it's certainly not your fault if somebody's being shitty to you. And they are ultimately accountable. I mean, it has to be that way, in order for, we have to be individually accountable on some level, or else justice basically falls apart. But morality, justice, everything we care about kind of falls apart. But you also have to recognize that some people, I can't find the right language here. It's like I want to say they can't do it. But again, that kind of removes agency and accountability. They can do it. Another part of me wants to say they're not willing to do it. Maybe that's slightly closer. Another way you could say it, they don't know how to do it. I think it's really hard to find the way that honors you in the interaction and honors the reality of what you're facing. It's something like, they're too lost. This is Christ on the cross, right? Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. That's closer, I think. But be careful with that one, because then you start to become the martyr. You start to become like, you're not Jesus. You're not, God doesn't need you to be that. You're who you are, and you don't need to take on a persona of being sort of the all compassionate one or something. I can't think of a good way to express it. Forgive me. Or don't forgive me. Because, I think a healthier perspective is recognizing, these are two adults talking. This adult should be accountable. It's okay to feel that and to recognize, yeah, this person should be accountable and be able to have an honest conversation and not manipulate, not strategize, go into their strategies and deflect, and recognize that's not going to be possible for most people. Now, there are people, just, you'd be surprised. Every now and again, somebody will really surprise you. Their humility and ability to meet you there and to be accountable, and it transforms a situation, and that's humbling. You bring something to somebody and they take accountability. It's so rare. And your role in that is not to gloat and to then, be like, victorious over them or something. No, your role in that is to be very, very humble. Receive it humbly and be appreciative if you can. Say, hey, I really, really appreciate you being accountable about this. You don't hold it over them afterwards, like I got one up or something. No. And I think that's part of why people are so afraid of having a vulnerable conversation, is because they don't want to then be hurt. People exploit us. People exploit people. And so most people, myself included in many ways, most people are very, very paranoid. And when you're not playing the games and you're just direct and honest, the paranoia in many people ratchets up. The volume on the paranoia dials gets turned up because it's very disorienting. It's like, whoa, they're not just playing the same old games here. This is something different, and it can really frighten people. And so you have to be aware of that. again, there's a lot to consider here, and it's really unfair in on some level to the burdens of having integrity. On some level, I don't want to say it too strongly, but yeah, you'll notice, and I think that's, now that I'm talking this through, I think that's part of what I was picking up is like one, a lot of discomfort with sitting down and having an honest conversation where we're not just being superficial and joking. He's good at that. He's really good at that kind of level of interaction, and in some healthy ways and other ways where I think not so much personally, but gossiping and shit talking. And anyways, but yeah, I sense discomfort, talking with him, trying to have just a honest conversation that's not sarcastic or joking or whatever. And you see all this energetically. It's like there's little flashes in people's eyes. I could see how he was getting, triggered, and I tried to say something to kind of defuse the situation. Like, hey, I'm not trying to upset you here. Let me know if I'm going too far with this. This is what I've observed. This is what I'm feeling. And staying calm and staying rooted. See, one of the challenges, this is something I wanted to express, one of the challenges in communication and being human is this thing in sort of a scientific materialist paradigm, which I more and more discount. I move further and further away from it as a useful way of talking about things. And so, again, this is not, I hold this one lightly, but you hear people talk about mirror neurons and this idea of limbic wiring, and how we do kind of energetically, limbically, if that's the right word, we tend to mirror each other's energy. And it's one of the reasons why things escalate, is because somebody's frustrated and that triggers something in the other person. It's like it cascades and it escalates. And so you have to be really careful. And this is where stillness, meditation, healing helps, because you learn to not be you learn to work through your triggers on one level to some extent. But you learn also to more and more, it's a process and nobody's perfect, but stay where you're at, stay in your own energy. And when you say something, and this is what's really challenging, is often you don't intend to hurt somebody with what you're saying. You're not trying to trigger them, and you can't go through the world totally anticipating every reaction somebody's going to have. Yes, you can be skillful, and there's ways to do that, like I just expressed, with starting out in a humble way, flagging moments of connection, which I need to do better probably, saying, hey, this is what's up for me. I don't know what's going on in your heart. I said that to him. I can't say for sure what's going on. So there's ways you can be skillful, and that does help to decrease. But even still, people are going to get triggered. It's hard for people to communicate. And it's hard in those moments because, at least for me, part of the way I'm wired, and I think it has to do with my upbringing in some not so good ways, is I felt guilty about other people's reactions. And it's almost like you say something, you're coming from a good place, but somebody has such a overreaction, or it's almost like you can feel how they heard it, or, well, I'm not even sure how to express it, but because they had a really bad reaction, all of a sudden you can internalize, oh shit, I did something bad here. That's a very hard pattern to deal with. That's a very, very, very difficult thing, at least for me, and I think probably for a lot of people. And the trick there is to just stay where you're at, not invest so much in how other people are going to react to you. And part of that is letting go of control, just doing your best, trusting you're a good person, trusting in your intentions, trusting that you've done some groundwork and have some integrity, and you're trying to be skillful, you're doing your best. And as best as you can, and it's very hard, let other people have their reactions. Not only not take it on, not take on that energy that they're projecting. Ultimately, the responsibility has to lie somewhere. And if you're coming from a good place, you're not trying to hurt somebody, and they got triggered, that's not your responsibility. It's really not. You also don't have to hate them for getting triggered. No, we all get triggered, but you don't have to take that on, and that's a challenge. That's really a challenge. To not feel bad, to not feel guilty, to not react back or attack back, or stay grounded. Now, you don't have to say nothing either. Like, I would say something, he'd get triggered, and I'd say, I'm trying to think of a good example. But I mean, something you could say is, look, I'm not trying to upset you. I'm just trying to express where I'm at. Or often they'll get triggered and they'll say something. And if you can, at that point, just hear the words that they're saying and stay calm. Like I expressed an apology, in this case, to this guy. And he said, what are you apologizing for? You know, real like defensive, can even feel like aggressive, attacking when you're being kind of vulnerable and humble. It's really inappropriate for somebody to do that. So that's a hard one. And I made eye contact, didn't flinch. I was already kind of still. And I said, I won't say the person's name. I said, blank. Blank, person's name. I don't know that I did something to hurt you. I'm just expressing that anything that I've done to harm you, I apologize. You know? And so you basically just say it again. Sometimes people need to hear it again because their minds get triggered into something. So you say it again. You don't take their bullshit. Now you can become even more fiercely locked in and just express it again slower. In a sense, it's like, if you're going to attack me for that, you're going to get it even more directly. Hey, no, that's not what I said. This is what I said. Or sometimes even in those cases, you can say, hey, I'm trying to be humble and direct. Please be kind. You know, you can call it out too. That's another option. Or even, yeah, stop attacking me. Stop being ugly. Let's be kind. Or relax. I'm apologizing, okay? Can you relax? And you maintain that eye contact and that focus. Often that can diffuse it and break whatever's happening there, energetic thing. And so I felt like there actually was some progress in in the conversation, part because I was so locked in. I wasn't escalating. I was staying rooted and as best as I could. He'd sidetrack with some other thing and say, and I would just have to say, no, that's not what I was talking about. The simpler, the quieter, the more direct, the less explanation in these conversations with people like this, the better. They don't have the capacity to hear much else. Also, don't waste your energy, justifying. Just stay with the facts. No, I didn't say that. That's frightening for some people to meet that kind of wall of stillness and non-reactiveness, I guess is one way to say it. Let's just say stillness, directness. And again, it's not an escalation. No, it's a stillness. And so, and we talked for a little bit. I felt something shift a little bit, like there was a little bit more energetic. There was like a shift in there. An empowerment or something because of, it's finally a chance, it's like you can avoid and be kind of unkind and all this, but it's like it was a chance, if nothing else, for my soul to express, to be human and to say, hey, this is a human being here, all right? You've got all these thoughts about who I am or whatever. No, here's this chance to express who I am, what I'm about. I felt I did that reasonably well, and there's a kind of a nobility and an empowerment that can come online, and that's really good. But I said something at some point. He got very upset and wasn't able to handle it, and said, "Okay, you know what? We're done." Got up and left. Now that in and of itself is a interesting thing to talk about. Let me try to unpack what I see as interesting about that. Here's all the ways that you could react that would not be the highest, that would not be the best in a situation like that. So somebody says that, they get triggered, and they storm off. You chase them. Hey, wait, 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 wait. You know, whatever it is. You chase them and apologize would be one thing. You chase them and try to explain yourself. You chase them or yell after them. Stop being a bitch. Don't run. You're being a fucking bitch. You know, so those are some of the options there. None of those are good. None of those are the highest. There is a tendency, for sure, to go in any of those directions. If you're trying to win, if you're trying to dominate, that could be a moment, you know, to say, "Oh, okay, you're fucking walking away, bitch, coward." You know, that would be one way. Wouldn't be the highest, wouldn't be the truth, but that would be one thing. The other thing that some of us struggle with is in that moment, again, what I tried to describe here a couple minutes ago, is to take that on like, "Oh shit, I really fucked up here." That's a real big temptation and a hard one. A very hard one. That can be a very, very hard one, especially if it's a power dynamic and got all these other kind of subterranean motivations inside of you of like, shit, now potentially I've lost my job, whatever. And so I need to quickly save face. I need to quickly make amends. I need to quickly that's another pull, that's another temptation at that moment. The highest is to stay rooted. That's always the highest. And to realize, and all those things would be kind of trying to control the situation. The ninja warrior, the highest. The battery is low. Let me try to plug this in. Okay. Got it plugged in. The lighting isn't as good, but anyways. The best thing to do in those situations, and what I could offer here, is to stay rooted. Don't react. And when you kind of play this out, you don't do it for these reasons I'm about to enumerate, but when you kind of play it out, you recognize it's the simplest thing. See, it relies on you having integrity. I mean, that's kind of the foundation of all this. And if you really were being inappropriate and being rude to somebody, yeah, it's okay to find them and apologize. That's totally fine and appropriate and good, and that can be healing all around. But if you weren't trying to hurt somebody, you're being calm, you're just expressing yourself, and for whatever reason they heard it in a way that triggered them and they weren't capable, that's not on you. That is not on you. That's on them. But again, at a certain point of having done this so often, you just realize that's part of the, again here, I don't want to absolutize or essentialize what I'm about to say. I want to say that's part of the human condition, but that makes it sound kind of fatalistic, deterministic. It's very endemic in humanity that people would react that way. And it's not the highest that people do that. It's coming from a place of confusion inside of them. And inside of us, I should say. It's not like I'm perfectly enlightened person or something. No, not at all. But I have done work in this area, so I feel like I have something to say about it, something to offer. And actually, I can think now that I'm saying this out loud of a time this happened with me. Somebody said something that I was talking to, and I walked away. I got frustrated. I said, well, I tried my best, and I walked away. And I did go back afterwards and try to express myself after I'd kind of cleared my head, and eventually I actually did apologize to this person. So, um, but the best thing to do is not react when somebody just gets pissed off and walked away. Don't take it on. If anything, it's on them. They weren't able to handle that. An adult should be ideally able to express and talk, but few people are, so you kind of have to hold that one loosely. And but what it does, I mean, it's consistent with, you don't really do it for this reason, but it's consistent with non-manipulation. You're not trying to control people. You're not trying to control the outcome. That's a fool's errand. It's going to exhaust you. It's an understandable temptation, but you really can't at the end. You can control people kind of. I mean, you can't really, but you can kind of manipulate the situations, but it's always going to carry a cost. It's always going to cause harm to them and also to you long term. It's a short term strategy, and even there, it's not that great of a strategy. But you got to be a lover of free will on some level to do this work. And, you know, he had that reaction. It's not in my hands. I can't control it, you know? And that's hard, especially for a lot of us that have grown up with parents that were emotionally unintelligent, and we were made to feel guilty about their reactions to stuff, implicitly or explicitly. Somehow we took that on, right? That I'm guilty. Maybe they weren't trying to make us, I don't know. Let's not even get into that discussion. But somehow we took that on. We had this feeling like, shit, I'm guilty. And maybe they explicitly said, like, you caused me to feel this way, or I don't know. So it's a deep pattern for a lot of people. Wish this cord was longer. I'll stop messing with it. But yeah, you don't react, you don't chase after them. It's hard. You can acknowledge that it's hard, and it's kind of brutal, especially when you're being vulnerable, trying to be honest, and somebody has that kind of reaction that's just so, you feel very unseen. Like, man, that had nothing to do with what I was saying, what I was trying to express, where I'm at emotionally, energetically. You can feel very abandoned. You can feel very unseen, and that sucks. You can acknowledge that. And that's your work in this, is to sit with that discomfort, to regulate, to soothe. It's also hard because for a lot of us, yeah, it triggers like an abandonment feeling, like, and we'll do whatever we can to stay in relationship with people sometimes, even if it's not healthy. You know, it's not a good thing to feed into that kind of reaction that somebody has. But it's like, shit, man, I fucked up. Now this relationship's whatever. And if it's a professional relationship, there's that added dimension too of like, shit, man. This person has some relative power. Not absolute, not even close to absolute. You know, your worth is not tied in there. And that's something to get clear on. But yeah, practically speaking, you know, you need to keep the lights on. And so there are many things to consider here, or at least a few. But sometimes, again, it's the best thing is just not to react, not to feed into it. What it allows for is that it leaves that person with their reaction. And if they're a thoughtful person, if they have any capacity to process, and on some level you have to hope, and I think it's probably true, that they recognize that this is on them, and the moment they project it outwards in anger. But there's a possibility there, you don't rely on this, but there's a possibility that they could recognize, like, wow, that was actually really mature that he didn't feed into that. Or they might not even be able to voice it that way, but it leaves the door open of like where they could come back and say, hey, I apologize, that was on me. And there's a possibility there that you can finish the thought you can say, yeah, I appreciate that. I was just trying to express this, and this. It seems like you took it this way, or whatever. You have to feel it out in the moment. But I was just trying to say this. And they might be able to hear it at that point. Or you could just, appreciate the fact that somebody took accountability, and that could be enough. But because if you torch them at that moment and say, "You fucking bitch, you running this and that," that might also provoke them to come back to you in kind of a meek, deferential way. Now you've got this kind of control energy over them or something, which does feel good to the ego. It provides a temporary, ultimately false sense of safety, like, okay, I've got this guy under my control now, right? I dominated him, I won or something. I mean, that's one strategy, but it is a strategy. It's not the truth. And it's not going to lead to true, authentic relationship. It's going to lead to a sense of safety, a false sense, ultimately. Or, if you escalate and say, "You fucking coward," or, "Oh, you walking away," especially with a boss or something, I mean, it could also have the impact of really harming you, because you're it could just trigger them to get even angry. I mean, so again, just letting them have their response, or not chasing after them. I mean, mostly it's just about being simple, My brain, and part of it is when you are simple, it's like in those moments, my brain wouldn't, it was so discordant from where I was at. It was hard for me to even comprehend, like, how did he get there from what I was saying? I mean, I can kind of see it, but don't do that work for them, trying to figure them out. And sometimes my brain is just too slow for people. That they're so fast with the reactivity, I just can't keep up. So just keep it simple. If he'd gotten really pissed off and stayed there, and I had a chance to stay looking at him, I could say, "Hey, man, whatever it is, I'm not trying to upset you." Something simple. Or relax, okay? You can be still, you can be firm, and you can look them in the eyes, and that can diffuse it, because they're afraid in that moment. Part of what they're having is a fear reaction. Their identity or something has been attacked, they feel, and so they're afraid. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what's going on for somebody else, but also by not reacting, you don't degrade yourself. Gives you time to kind of reflect on, is there something further I need to say here? It can also, this is kind of just, I don't know, this is not the highest dimension to consider, but it's just a way that integrity kind of protects everything. But even kind of at the HR level or legal level, it's not going to look good if you chase after somebody and escalate. It's the mature thing to do in that sense. It's the right thing. Let's not really go too much into that. It's just kind of a knockoff downstream effect is at that level. It's the right thing. But it's right because it's the truth, It wouldn't have felt true to get reactive myself and to chase after him. No, I just did the best I could. He had the reaction he had. And most of the work for me these days is just not feeling guilty about somebody else's reaction, not trying to manage their reaction. That's the big thing. And afterwards, it felt like pretty clean for me, because I had run the race, so to speak. I had engaged in a pretty clean way, humble way, tried to be honest, tried to have integrity. I wasn't attacking or something like that. And there's less residue after something like that. Even if it doesn't end well, you hope it ends well. There were little glimmers that were kind of edging in, and who knows what's going to happen from here. But you can't control all that stuff, and you'll exhaust yourself trying. So, yeah. Now, there was another interaction later in the day. It's interesting often what life will do is you'll have a great interaction and feel like you've very clear, kind of blissed out. And there's a settledness, there's a peace there in your nervous system and in your spirit. It's beautiful. Sucks that we have to go through hell to get there sometimes, but it happens. There's clarity. Often in those moments, life is going to attack you with more force. It's going to throw another thing at you. I don't know why the game is designed that way. It's really dumb. You could say, oh, it's just to further cement your peace and your healing process. Like, nah, fuck that, man. Life is so hard. Just give us a break, at some point. That's how I feel. God, give us a break, But you got to be aware that that's often going to happen after a healing moment, is there's going to be another test. I don't know if I want to dramatize it that strongly, but let me leave it there. This is a long video, so hopefully something useful. Well, I don't know. I find myself saying that, hopefully something useful. I don't know that my intentions are that noble, but anyways, let me leave it there and take care.